Greetings, everyone. Thank you for tuning into my channel. I have a very special guest, somebody who I connected with about maybe 4 years ago when I was a Christian. His name is Josh Patterson. He has done many, many interviews with Christians, and philosophers on various topics. And I'm simply just having a freestyle discussion with him. He is a Christian. He does identify himself as a Christian, and I'm a former Christian. And we just want to discuss theology, talk about philosophy, and just kind of let it go. So, Josh, thank you for coming on. I hope that I'm coming in okay. I hope I'm not, in and out. Okay, perfect. For now, like I stated before, I live up in the hills over here in California, and sometimes, the internet is kind of rocky, kind of shaky. But at the end of the day, thank you for coming on. Just introduce yourself. Tell us what you're about, and Rethinking Faith. That's the name of your podcast. Tell
hmm
us what is it about? Rethinking Faith. It kind of sounds like a skeptic would say something like that. It's kind of controversial, so that's why I think it'll make an interesting discussion. So tell us about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So, like you said, my name's Josh Patterson. Um, I'm a former pastor. I think last time we talked, I was still serving in vocational ministry. As they would say. I did that for about 6 years, and then for a variety of reasons, I stopped doing that, and I became a professional brewer.
Mm,
So I brewed beer professionally for about 3 years, which was a lot of fun. I really loved doing that. I'm a huge beer fan, beer snob, whatever you want to call it. But like, unfortunately, brewing just doesn't really pay the bills. So now I have a boring adult job, working for the state, doing adult things. But that's a little bit about me. As far as the podcast goes, Rethinking Faith, I started it a while ago. It's been going on for about 7 years now. With a buddy of mine at the time. Well, he's still a friend of mine, but his name was Andy, and the point initially was to show two people with very different theological perspectives could hold theological conversation from across the aisle, so to speak. Um, and it worked for a little bit until it didn't. And he left. And then I got another co-host, who, as the show continued to grow and shift and change, it almost just became a way of me talking to and interviewing different theologians and scholars, that I wanted to talk to, right? As my own kind of faith, spirituality shifted and changed over time. That's kind of what the podcast has been. You can kind of trace that arc. So Marty was on for a hot minute, did over 100 episodes with him. Then I had another guy after that named Greg. Greg was great, but he left as well. So I think, maybe I just scare off co-hosts. Um,
okay.
but I'm still great friends with all of them. They just, other priorities in life. But yeah, I'm a process relational thinker. That's kind of the camp I put myself in, if I had to choose. Although I'm also very, very fond of radical theology, which is maybe something we could talk about later. I think you might be interested in some of the thoughts
Let's
there.
talk about it now. I'm already
All
interested.
right.
What is radical theology? That sounds cool.
Yeah, so I'm gonna well, I'll try to do my best. I'll give a little bit of a background. So this comes out
Okay.
of this is a post-Holocaust theology. So this kind of started with Jews wrestling with this idea that, like, wait a minute, we were the chosen people of God, and the Holocaust happened, so what the heck? Like, something's not
Yes.
adding up here. And so you had a lot of Jewish thinkers become atheists, um, and some of them, started writing. There's a book called After Auschwitz. The author's last name is Rubenstein, and essentially he's trying to answer questions about, like, how is this possible? And basically, a theology grows out of this movement, that's very similar to, like, the death of God stuff, right? So you have Nietzsche, who said God is dead. And this kind of radical theology would agree and would accept the claim that the omni God is dead, that God does not exist.
Okay.
Um, and so within the Christian tradition, uh, the person who I've read the most and really enjoy is John Caputo, who's a radical theologian, or he likes to call himself a weak theologian. Um, and so something, interesting that Caputo likes to say is that God does not exist, but God is an insistence.
Okay.
Hey, Matt Baker, what's up, bro? Uh, so yeah, God is an insistence. God is a provocation, a lure, a call. But to posit existence as a category to the divine would be a category error. So that's um, some very elementary thoughts in radical theology.
But you do believe that God exists.
Sometimes it depends. It depends on the day.
Okay. All right. I can feel you on that, especially the existence of evil.
Mhm.
Especially evil when it happens to children. It's like, the theism argues for intelligent design, right? And we use that phrase intelligent design. You go, then what's the intelligence of, babies being born with birth defects and suffering? What's the intelligence of God allowing children to be molested, to be sex trafficked, to be murdered? And oftentimes, Josh, I get hit with the free will argument, which I'm sure you know very well.
Mhm.
God gives humanity choice and free will, but at the end of the day, the children don't have free will. The children don't have a choice. They're victims. They're innocent. So how can
Mhm.
you say that? Yeah, you can say the adult has a choice. Okay, fine, I grant that to you. But they're innocent victims, so they don't have a choice. They don't, you know what I mean? So it's like that free choice argument only goes so far, especially when you're born with birth defects, with a disease or any type of deformity. You don't have choice in that matter, and so that argument to me, it's very very weak. And I even bring up times in the Bible where God kills people just like that. Boom, both Old and New Testament. Uzzah touched the Ark of the Covenant, David's friend, and what did God do? Josh struck him dead for touching the Ark of the Covenant. But yet here are grown men touching little boys, and he just allows it to happen. You have even in the New Testament, Acts 12, Herod failed to give God glory, and because he failed to give him glory, God struck him, and he died. And the angel of the Lord came and struck him, and he died. So God can very well kill instantly like that. But I'm glad that you brought up the Holocaust, because many Jews fell away from Yahweh. Especially you look at the Old Testament. Yahweh would come through for His people, and the Orthodox Jews, they say, "Oh, it's because you weren't following Torah or something like that." Amazing, but so some days I do feel that way as well. But do you believe that Yahweh, the Bible God, is the true God, or maybe there's another mind out there, simulation theory, whatever?
Um, yeah. So on days when I posit that God exists, when I'm comfortable doing that, I'm comfortable with using the name Yahweh because it's the name for God within the tradition that I grew up in, which is Christianity. Um, but the my conception, my notion of the God that I believe in, looks very different than the God of classical theism, which is going to be, most common within a lot of Christian spaces.
Okay.
And so that's where kind of the process aspect comes in for me. So for example, something that's really looks very different. Because even I think most process people are fine saying the omni God, the God of classical theism is dead. That God doesn't exist. That God doesn't make sense.
Mm,
Um, and so like one thing, for example, within the problem of evil, part of the issue with that is, the classical formulation is like if God is all good and God is all loving, then why does bad shit
yeah.
happen, right?
Right.
Um, so there's a couple different ways people go about that. Some people could just say, well, God's not loving, but
Yeah.
God is all powerful. Or you could say that God is not all powerful, but still loving. I kind of go with the latter. I would like to say if God exists, God is love, and necessarily loving. And so I'm going to reject that God is omnipotent. So I think that because God is love, and there's a couple different moves here, but I think that because God is love, and love is non-coercive, that God doesn't, and actually, in fact, cannot coerce creation. And
Mm,
so God can't step in and make me do anything. God doesn't have that ability.
okay.
Um, yeah, and so, like, God can't prevent genuine evil on God's own, in my view. Another part that comes into play with that though has to do with the fact that like God doesn't have a localized body. God is spirit. So God like doesn't have hands to like swoop in and do stuff.
Sure.
Um, is another aspect of it. Um, so like those two things I think provide us some help, at least in moving toward some kind of, I don't know if I'm comfortable using solution, but solution to the problem of evil. If you have a loving being that cannot prevent genuine evil unilaterally, but necessitates creaturely cooperation. So that's
Okay,
like
so
one
so let me
difference.
ask you. Let me ask you. Do you believe that God created humanity, like He's the causation, He's the prime mover of the human race?
Yeah, so within a process framework, yes, I'd be comfortable saying that. But I'd want to make a distinction like I would say that creation and God necessitate one another. They're co-eternal.
Okay,
Um so God in the world, and maybe not even this world, maybe there's been multiple universes, but God has never existed without some form of material reality.
okay.
So God is still creator, but it's not the kind of creation ex nihilo like within, you find in Christianity.
Gotcha. Okay, that's interesting. So, what are your views on eschatology? Do you believe that Christ is the one and true only way to God? Do you believe that Christ is going to one day return? I mean, because you do identify yourself as a Christian, and that is an essential Christian doctrine. So, do you believe that Christ is sitting on the throne right now, and one day He's going to come and bring about a new heavens and a new earth? What are your views on that?
Yeah, so I will answer the eschatology question second because you hinted at some and sorry, I'm just taking notes for myself because I have
Of course,
ADHD and it's helpful.
of course.
It'd be helpful for you and your listeners. But I'll come back to the eschatology because I think within my perspective, because you asked, the first question you asked is Jesus the one and only way to God? I would be comfortable saying no, but I think
Okay,
Jesus is a unique way to God, is a unique exemplification of who God is, a
mm,
unique revelation, maybe you could say. Um, so how I would say it from a process perspective is that so you and I, right, in each moment, God is present in and through all things. Also in this framework, you have to note the future does not yet exist. The future is genuinely open. So we are writing history with the divine, if that makes sense. So what happens is God takes in all of creation into the divine self, evaluates it, and then offers in each moment of becoming the next best possible thing. So always luring creation into the good, the beautiful, and the true. So that means for you and I, the divine is meeting us in each moment, moment by moment, evaluating our past, and then bringing all of that knowledge with God's self to offer the next best possible thing. And maybe on a good day, maybe I give in to the divine lure and I get like a 6 out of 10, right? Like Josh had a really good day. He like loved some orphans and like took care of some widows, gave some homeless people some cash, this kind of thing. What makes Jesus unique is that Jesus was faithful to the divine lure, um, always, to the point where he
okay.
literally becomes the image of the invisible God. And so Jesus is like cranked up to 11, right? Out of the scale of 10. So that's
Nice.
in a process framework, that's kind of what makes Jesus unique,
Okay.
as an exemplification of who God is.
But so you
So
don't believe, so you do believe that Jesus was a real person? Like, do you accept that the New Testament is 100% historically accurate, like a fundamentalist, like a conservative? Or do you believe there's any like mythological implications in the New Testament?
I think there's all sorts of mythological implications in the New Testament.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm comfortable saying that like there's probably a historic person named Jesus, and that he taught some things, and we may have some reliable, you know, uh, records of some of those kind of things that Jesus taught. Um, but I don't focus too much on like if all the miracles and stuff literally happened or not. I'm more interested in like what can we gain or what can we learn from these stories.
What about the resurrection?
I don't know, dude. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. Um yeah, I'm really not sure. I think the resurrection can function very strongly as a symbol, in the way that someone like Paul Tillich talks about symbol, where
Okay.
symbols participate in the reality that they point to. So it's not just a symbol, it's
Gotcha.
participating in a greater reality.
Gotcha.
But it doesn't mean that like if you stood outside the tomb with a video camera, like, would you have captured, like, Jesus walking out of the grave? I don't know. Um, but I think the myth, the symbol of resurrection is powerful. Um,
Okay. So, well,
yeah.
let me ask you, what about life after death? Do you believe that there is an afterlife, or do we go back to non-existent?
I don't know what I think about an afterlife. I will say this, I hope there's an afterlife. Um, and I think because of to go back to your problem of evil bit, if I wanna be consistent in saying that if there is a God, that God is love, um, then that God also has to have some semblance of justice. And I think it's fair to say that there are lives where people are born, their entire brief existence is nothing but pain, torture, and suffering, and then they die. That's not cool. And so
Yeah.
there has to be some kind of justice for those kinds of people, and an afterlife, at least in my mind, could provide some kind of redeeming,
Yeah.
something
What
to a
about,
life that was.
we talked about the Holocaust. What about Adolf Hitler? Like, there are Christians that will say, if Adolf Hitler repented seconds before, you've probably heard this, seconds before he died, he would have had mercy and God would have forgave him, like the thief on the cross type analogy. I mean, to me, that would be moral, in my opinion. Like, it's like, yeah, it's like, so at the very tail end, he gets to make it to heaven, while the Jews who rejected Christ, the ones that he killed by command, they go to hell because they crucified the Messiah their ancestors did years back. What do you think about, and even if we believe in an afterlife, there's a mind out there and justice. Bad people go to a bad place, good people go to a good place. And is that forever? That's the second layer. Is it forever? Okay, are we in heaven, or a heavenly paradise forever, and then maybe we do something wrong up there? And is hell an eternal damnation, weeping and gnashing of teeth? Is that forever? Like, what are your views on that?
Yeah, so I don't have anything too solid on what exactly I think something like a heaven or hell would be. Um, I reject outright eternal conscious torment.
Okay.
The idea that, people are tortured in hell forever, I don't buy that. Um, maybe I mean, I think the Bible teaches the annihilation view most consistently, which is just the idea that if you don't somehow appropriate yourself to Christ or like choose to be in relationship with God, then you cease to exist. Um, but for me, I can't call myself a universalist. Like
Okay.
if there's something like heaven, I can't call myself that because it would mean I can't be consistent in my idea that God's love is uncontrolling. For God's love to be uncontrolling means that we always have to have the ability to choose not to love God. And
Mm,
so there's some people like Adolf Hitler who might I mean, we could think it's reasonable to assume that Hitler might never want to be reconciled to the people that he harmed, to all the millions of people that he killed, or to the divine. And so, within my perspective, God honors that choice, and I don't know. I don't think like that means someone's being tortured somewhere. But I also would say I don't think God ever gives up on creatures. Um, God continues to love always. And so the possibility remains open. But I think there are those who will choose um, not to be in relationship uh, with God. Um,
By the way, my camera
if that
went
makes
out, but
sense.
you're good. You're good. I called
Cool.
this out. I don't know what in the
Yeah.
world happened, but
Right.
I called it out. I'm gonna go and try to unplug it, but you're
You know,
I can hear you just fine. I know you can hear me just fine. So okay, so there is a possibility of an afterlife. Of course, we don't know what that entails. And if bad people go to a bad place, I think that's justice, you know. But is it eternal? Like, do they get a second chance? And it's like, okay, so they get a second chance. So this God or gods or whatever, they go, okay, you've been in here for quite some time. Are you sorry for what you did? Yes, we're sorry for what I did on my life here on earth. So then what happens then? Like, he goes, okay, well, now you could come to the paradise place and you can come and kick it with all of us. Like, is that what happens? Or does he say, okay, well, maybe I'll reincarnate you and let's see how you do on life in life here on earth and see if you can maybe come back. You know, like what would that entail? You know what I mean? Like
mm.
the righting the wrong. You know, that's what I ponder on. Like if there is a second chance, what does that entail? Like, okay, come hang out with us, or do you have to go through another, I don't know, a test, or do you have to go through another life? What do you think?
Yeah, I think in order for it to be just, it would necessitate some kind of um, reconciliation. I think one would have to genuinely face the pain and suffering that they caused in life. That you know they would have to be reconciled to those that they did injustice to.
Mm,
Um, Gregory of Nyssa, an early church father, um, he would use this metaphor of a rope. So, like, picture your life is can be represented by like a rope, and that rope is laying outside for however many like years you're alive, right? Maybe we're lucky and we got 100 years. So you can imagine over the course of that 100 years, the rope would start to look unrecognizable. It'd get covered in mud and get weathered, and like probably some animals shit on it or something. So it's gross. And then imagine there's this like hole that the rope used to fit in, but now that it's all gunked up, it doesn't quite fit anymore. So Gregory said, like, if that's your life, then Jesus kind of serves and again in his perception, as one who comes and like pulls the rope back through that hole, and as it comes through, it's shaving all of that gunk off and kind of restoring the rope back to its original form, right? Um, so that would be, imagine if anthropomorphize the rope, that'd be a painful experience.
yeah.
But it's also purifying.
Go. Okay.
So there's a lot of language around that in this, the Christian tradition of this purifying
Yeah.
fire that
Yeah.
refines rather than
Yeah.
destroys or something like that.
Gotcha. So that's what
Yeah.
would happen. Essentially, they're in this place of punishment, whatever that entails, whether it's a spiritual fire or whatever, a prison or something, and then eventually it makes them right. And
S-
then it does it make them eternally right? You know, like now they're you see what I'm saying? Like now they're
Yeah.
do they have the free choice in this manner? Like, what if they were to state, well, I don't want to be made right? Like, I don't know. I mean, you see what I'm saying? Like, do we have free
Mhm.
choice in this heavenly place? Like, could we rebel like supposedly Satan and his demons did? Like, so once we go to heaven, that's it. Like, you don't have any freedom of choice to do anything evil. And the Bible doesn't talk about this. You know,
Mhm.
this is something that is a philosophical investigation, but I think it's very interesting. So it's like, do we have free will in this heavenly paradise place? And those who get redefined, they come and hang out with us. If we make it to this good place, then what happens? Are we eternally good? Essentially, are we eternally qualified to be in this heavenly place? What do you think about that?
I have no freaking idea.
I mean, nobody
um,
does, but it's
yeah,
speculation, you know. And it's like, you
yeah.
know,
I mean, it kind of reminds me, like, have you seen the show The Good Place?
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I actually, spoiler alert for people who haven't seen it, I'm going to ruin the ending of the show. Um,
Okay.
I actually really love the ending of the show when they finally make it to the good place and they have all these beautiful and wonderful experiences, and then they have the ability, there's like this beautiful like archway in the forest that if they are ready to end their conscious existence in the good place, they have the ability to do so. Um And so then there are
Mm,
characters who make that decision. They
yeah.
experience a good place, and then they're like, I don't know, I want to peace out. And for me, that's appealing to me because, to be honest with you, the idea of eternal life scares the shit out of me. Like,
Really?
yeah,
Wow.
I don't. It's not appealing.
Are you
um,
afraid to die? Are you afraid to die? I had Taylor up on the podcast. She told me she's afraid to die. I'm like, so am I. I don't want to die.
yeah,
So
I
it's
mean,
like,
the joking way, the tongue in cheek way, I would say it is like, I don't know because I'll be dead, and then like I won't
right.
care because I'm dead. But I think I'm afraid of. I mean, I think in general humans tend to like when someone says like that they have zero fear of death. I think they're lying either to others or to themselves. Because as humans, like the preservation of life is baked into like how we
Yeah.
function, right?
Yeah.
So no one is like doesn't have some kind of fear around it. Um, but I think my biggest fear wouldn't be in what happens after we die. From my experiential knowledge of what, I believe to be the divine. Like I said, on days when I'm comfortable positing God, God is love. I don't fear what awaits if there's like an afterlife. Um, but I am afraid of the prospect of like leaving my loved ones behind
Mm,
and, you know, what that would look like for them. That's more scary is like the earthly ramifications um than the ones that happen in a realm that we don't have access to.
gotcha.
At
Gotcha.
least
Well,
currently, yeah.
let me ask you. So, like, if we can touch on eschatology,
Yeah, let's do it.
what are your views of eschatology? I mean, you did identify yourself as a Christian, and I know that many Christians, just based upon what you told me, especially fundamentalists, conservatives, would probably deem you as not a Christian. They're going to say, you
Mhm.
believe the
Oh,
mythological
yeah.
aspects. Christ is not the only way. You're a heretic for a lot of Christians, and of course, I'm a skeptic. I identify myself as not a Christian. I'm on my way to hell. I'm going to the lake of fire with Satan and his demons. And it's funny. I tell Christians, well, I'm not a Satanist. If the devil is real and Satan is real, and if Satan ever appeared to me, I would slap Satan in his face, because if Satan is the one who's whispering in the ears of humanity, causing them to do evil, why would I pledge allegiance to that? So you can't say that I'm satanic. You can't say that the
Mhm,
devil's in my mind when I'm over here trying to fight for suffering children and argue that this should not happen in the world. So if I were to
mhm,
hang my hat on why I'm no longer a Christian, it's because of suffering kids, doing it for the kids. And so that's a satanic thing because I'm looking out for innocent children. You see how funny that is? It's like
mhm,
it's just a basic, fundamental, foundational ethic that I don't think that we have to justify to
mhm.
fight for innocent children against this theistic worldview. But anyways, so what are your views of eschatology? Do you believe that Jesus is going to one day return to the earth, stop evil? He's going to come on a white horse, all that stuff, stop evil and new heavens, new earth type stuff.
Yeah, so when I was a Christian, or when I was a Christian, geez, when I was still a pastor, and when I still would be identified as a Christian by most other Christians, um, I held some kind of preterist position, like a partial preterist kind of thing
Okay.
where I assumed like, you know, most of the stuff was kind of already fulfilled, so to speak, and like the destruction of the temple and all this kind of stuff. Like I think with like the Olivet discourse, like Jesus was talking about like, hey, if you guys don't stop fucking around, you're gonna find out.
Right.
And they didn't, and they found out. Um, and then like maybe like the hope for me then at that point was that the kind of the restoration and redemption of all things would happen, that at that time how I would say it is that heaven and earth would be united once again as one. So it wasn't about escaping and going somewhere else, but rather heaven and earth coming together and being restored.
Okay.
So that was kind of my perspective then. um Now I really don't know, but where I find a lot of hope is because, like, within the process framework, I can't guarantee any of that. Like, I can it always exists as a hope that's on the horizon, this kind of lure into, again, the good, the beautiful, and the true, to be actualized, but there's no guarantee because creation or creatures can always choose not to go in the way of the divine. So I don't have any guarantees in process thought. But then within radical thought, or even just like someone like Walter Benjamin, who is another Jewish thinker, um, not necessarily a radical theologian, but like someone like Caputo picks up his work a lot. He had this notion, again, he's Jewish, but he had this notion of the Messiah not as a person, um, but it could, I guess, be actualized by peoples, multiple. But what for him, the weak Messiah, messianic or whatever that exists within all of us, is the ability to remember the past. And when we can remember the past can be redeemed. And so
Okay.
for Benjamin, um, the messianic was always a potential that existed within people waiting to be actualized, right? Or for Caputo, how Caputo would say it, he would say that again, God is an insistence. God doesn't exist, but God insists. And so the uh, we won't know if God would have existed until after the fact. And so Caputo's interested in what he calls the theology of the event. Um, so like when we look back in time and we see when love and goodness and beauty were actualized, it is in those moments, in those events, that the God existed. And
Mm.
so the Messiah, the Messianic, functions the same way. He has a Messiah-less messianism or something like that, where it's always this hope. It's always an invocation, a provocation, but no one is coming to save us. It necessitates us, like we people, have to actualize the divine potentiality. Um,
Okay.
eh, so it spreads kind of the responsibility, not just you know on one people, but on one person rather, but on many. Which I don't know. So like these are eschatological um, understandings of things, but none of them have any guarantees. There's no promise. Does that make sense? I kind of threw a lot at you.
Yeah, but okay, so essentially, you really don't believe that Christ is up sitting on a throne, and one day he's going to return physically and bring about a new heavens and a new earth. You're rejecting that idea.
I think so.
Okay.
Today, today I am at least.
Yeah, for sure, huh?
I think so.
Uh,
Yeah.
so, that's very controversial. I mean, because most Christians, that's what they believe in. And you brought up preterism. You used to be a partial preterist. I used to be a full preterist.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, Dr. Richard Carrier, famous renowned atheist. Um,
Yes.
yeah, as a matter of fact, I sponsored a recent debate in last October with him versus the leading full preterist voice, Don Preston. If you go on Myth Vision podcast, I sponsored that debate because I used to
Cool.
be a full preterist. Yeah, and when we had first connected years back, I was a Christian. My page was Theology Discussions. I was a
Mhm.
Christian, and it was full preterism that all things were fulfilled. Somebody reached out to me in a live discussion, like the same one that we had, and he was telling me that all these prophecies were fulfilled. He was bringing up Bertrand Russell, renowned agnostic. Many have attributed him as an atheist. He's helped push the atheistic movement, and he was saying that Christ was a failed prophet. And anyways,
Mhm.
make a long story short, I wound up becoming a full preterist. I bought into it. I said, well, if Christ did not return in 70 AD in the destruction of the temple, that makes Christ a liar. He had stated that he was going to return in his generation. People were waiting for it, expecting it, and it didn't happen. So I used to be a full preterist. And so it's very interesting that used to be a partial preterist, that something happened, right? But then now there's some prophecies that are still waiting to be fulfilled. And it's been
Mhm.
2,000 years too long. And it's like, I tell Christians, it's 2,000 years too long. Like, what other religious text, what other religion would you put your faith in if it took 2,000 years and counting for it to happen? You know what I'm saying? So that's very interesting that you brought that up because most Christians, especially when they're deeply embedded in scholasticism, they'll see that something happened in 70 AD, that Jesus talked about the destruction of the temple. Something must have happened. The full preterists say it was all fulfilled in 70 AD. And as a matter of fact, I had a debate yesterday with the full preterists, and I tell the full preterists, well, then if everything was fulfilled in 70 AD, then what else is for us today?
Mm.
That means that Christianity would end in 70 AD. So that's very interesting that you brought that up. So yeah, we touch on some very interesting topics. The existence of evil is one. If I were to hang my hat on why I'm no longer a Christian, is because of the existence of evil. So, well, let me ask you. Of course, all of us want evil to stop. What do
Mhm.
you think? Will humanity ever stop evil scientifically? Maybe, maybe it's something like neurological. Some have even suggested that there's like an evil gene. Maybe, perhaps. I understand it's theory. I understand that it's not scientific. But what if we could find something genetic or something neurological about evil? I know Sam Harris, neuroscientist, atheist, talks about this. What do you think? If it is evil something scientific? Is it something that could be genetic? How are we going to stop this?
I mean, I think even if you say somehow manage to get rid of humans doing evil stuff, I think you still have the problem of natural evil
Okay.
that exists in the world. And so, like, I don't know. I guess we'd have to try to solve that one too, right?
Like
Like,
tornadoes and earthquakes and stuff like that, right?
yeah, tornadoes and earthquakes are like, what about the mother deer out in the woods who is shot by a hunter and isn't killed and is suffering and trying to take care of her babies? Like, that's evil. That deer is suffering.
Yeah.
At least in my perspective, I know some people will call me like crazy for caring about animals. Um,
Terrible.
but yeah, but I think
Well, I'm
it's
not a vegan, so I'm not a
yeah,
vegan,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I don't argue with vegans. I see their argument. And it's
Yeah.
like, I get it. Like, we have this human superiority complex. Like, oh, because you can't talk and because you're not human, I'm just going to eat you. I get
Mhm.
that. But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, and also, like, for the record, I'm not a vegan either, but I think, like, yeah, it is there's all these different kinds of evil. I don't think it's just predicated on humans, but even to go, like, I don't know if it could be solved or not, but I don't even know, like, based off the rate that we're going, I don't think we're gonna have a future for that to happen. Like,
Okay.
humanity is we're gonna be, like, one of the first creatures to fucking make ourselves go extinct because
Wow.
we're stuck on this myth of capitalism, of unlimited growth and potential, and we're destroying our home and our planet. And like, we're living in the Anthropocene. There are some estimates that people within the next 100 years won't exist anymore because we're going
Wow.
to destroy ourselves.
Like
Uh,
nuclear war or something like that. Like, it could be anything.
Nu
I get it,
Yeah,
but like,
nuclear war, or we continue to desecrate the environment, and exploit it. Like, I mean, it's happening now. Species are going extinct. It's crazy.
but
So I
God's
know.
in control.
Yeah.
But God is in control. The earth abides forever. It's like, okay.
Right.
Yes,
That's
yes.
yeah, and that I mean, I think that's kind of, for me, part of the problem with, like, the kinda, like, rapture stuff, or a Christianity, or any religion, for that matter, that is focused on the afterlife and not the here and now, because it
Ah,
serves as
man.
this, like, escapism, um,
Yes.
where, when you have a Christianity that believes in something like the rapture, that the earth is just gonna be destroyed, and
Yeah.
humans, they take the idea from Genesis that dominion means that we just rape and pillage the earth rather than care for it. um, eh, of course, destroy the Earth because it doesn't matter. We're gonna float off into space one day anyway, and it's like
Right.
the fruits of that suck, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Store your
so
treasures up in heaven. This life doesn't
right.
really matter. And people give their whole life over to this faith-based theology. And it's like, it decreases the value of this life. This
Mhm.
one thing that we have, that we know for sure that we have, is this life. I'm so glad you brought that up. This escapism, like, just leave it all behind, and your loved ones are going to get left behind. The Antichrist is going to come and torture them. But hey, you're going to be in heaven. So at least you got yours. You're up in heaven, right?
You'll
And
be
it's
good
like,
to go, right? And it's
you're good to
crazy.
go.
That's
You just worship Jesus all day long, all night long, just praising Jesus every single day for all eternity. Anyways, what were you going to say?
no, I don't know. I think, like, for me, the the focus on the here and now is what's important. So,
Yeah.
like, when I say I'm still a Christian, like, what I mean by that is I believe in the mythopoetic structure of Christianity. It provides a good story, um, it provides direction in life. Hopefully when I live into the teachings of Jesus, it makes me a better person and it makes those around me uh, have better life experiences. Um, but also, like, when I think about the opposite, if I didn't have some kind of faith structure, then like what's the story? Like, what's the story, for example, outside of religious belief in America? The like biggest like orienting story is that of capitalism. That your
Mm,
inherent worth and value is based off how many bricks you can build for empire.
mm.
That's like a shit story, right?
So I
Uh,
take it you're not a capitalist.
I don't like capitalism. I live in a capitalistic society, but I'm not the biggest fan of it. But yeah, like that story just sucks. Or like, this kind of like neoliberalism that we have going on when people have been turned into kind of the products, right? And like we're kind of constantly sold this myth and lie of constant self improvement and self actualization, like getting better, better, and better and better to the point of constant, like burnout. So it's no longer like this way of controlling people by domination, but by giving them exactly what they want. Um,
Okay.
and it's a again, I think it's a crappy story. But like if I choose to believe that choose to believe is difficult. I don't know that we choose to believe much.
That's
But
interesting.
yeah, I think like when looking at stories, if on days when I believe in God and I believe that the truest thing about me is that God knows my name, knows my face, and gives a shit, like that's a good story. I'm here for that, and that's true not just about me, but about you and everybody. Like that's cool. Um, but ultimately, I think for me, it comes down to the word faith, which I think gets pooped on a lot because people often pit faith against something like reason or logic and say
Yeah.
that faith just means, right, we blindly, like the Bible says it, I believe it, that settles it, right? I'm
Yeah, yeah.
not interested. My buddy Aaron Simmons, he's a phenomenologist, Kierkegaard scholar,
Oh,
and he
wow.
defines faith as risk in a direction. And so I take that idea, and then he says, like, we have to ask ourselves, what is worthy of our finitude? When we recognize that we're all going to die, what is worthy of your finitude? What is worthy, in that aspect? And so then I take those two things and I pair them with Paul Tillich, who Tillich says everybody has faith. Everybody, atheists have faith, and faith is just simply your matter of ultimate concern. So for me, my matter of ultimate concern is love. And so what I do then is I risk myself in the direction of love. When I contemplate what is worthy of my finitude, love is worthy of my finitude. Um, and then I risk myself in that direction. So faith is not a set of beliefs that I have to mentally ascend to, but rather a fundamental disposition and orientation, a way of being in the world, a way of existing, um, that hopefully makes the world a better place. Do you need Christianity to do that? No, but it's a tradition I
Right.
grew up in. I know how to use the language, so maybe I can hang out.
Okay, well, let me
Does that
ask you
make
here.
sense? Yeah.
Yeah, it does. Well, let me ask you here's often a challenging question in epistemology, like how would you describe phenomenology? Like other than feelings. That's usually like it's all like relative feelings, but there are many especially those in the West, philosophers that have stated, look, if you're tired of having a logical Western analytical approach to your life, that phenomenology is an alternative worldview. And I'm being honest, it took me some time to understand phenomenology. Like, what is this? Like, what the hell is this? Like, so help me out. Like, describe it to me. What is phenomenology? Is it like feelings of relativism? Like, like I've often heard like, oh, well, this cup, it means something to me, like my mother gave me this cup. This cup has my fingerprints on it, and it's kind of like feelings is what it is. Like, describe it to me. Phenomenology, what is it?
Yeah, I wanna do my best, but I am no phenomenologist, and I'm gonna get
Okay.
this very, very wrong. But I know
Okay,
it's
that's funny.
and so, like, if maybe someone is in the comments listening, they can help me out. Like, if Matt Baker's still around, he could do a better job than I could. Um, but, like, my understanding is it's, like, the study of, like I mean, experience is a part of it, but it's also, like, the givenness of things in the world, so it's more than just experience. Um, because you have also I mean yeah, and this is really where I struggle because I know it's like, uh, Husserl and then Heidegger are like 2
Yeah.
of the big ones in phenomenology. Actually, I just went to a lecture at Duke, by Jean Luc Marion, who's a phenomenologist, um,
Wow.
and I understood about half of it.
Yeah.
Um,
Hey, that's a
my
lot.
yeah,
Half is a lot.
my buddy Trip Fuller, he understood the whole thing and explained it in great detail on the way home. So he knows phenomenology well, but, like, I think it's more than simply just experience. It's like the given again, it's like the givenness of things in the world. So, like, maybe I can get at it by trying to explain a little bit of what Marion does. So, like, he has a book that's pretty famous. Like, his big famous book is called, God Without Being. So, like, probably again, people in the comments correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think he would be comfortable saying something like, "Yeah, of course God doesn't exist. That's a silly question to like posit existence to the divine as a category error." Um, but like whatever the divine is, how we experience it is always mediated by something, right? So, and if we're a Christian, then we could say like experience of the divine is mediated through the pages of the Bible or
Mhm.
through communion or through a worship song or through a sermon, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Um, but like those things are like it's always those things that oh shoot
Here.
there we go. Okay, so those things they he would call like an icon,
Okay.
and then we also have like our mental understandings, our pictures of whatever the divine is. And whatever those pictures are never God as God is in God's self, um, but rather our experience of that. So it's he calls that an idol,
Okay.
idolatry. Yeah, so I didn't really answer what is phenomenology. I need a good definition, but uh those are some of the things I think I understand about it.
That's interesting. Let me go ahead and look
Wait.
up what the definition is, and
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
yeah, but, there's a large, number of people in the world who identify as phenomenologists, and, I'm still trying to figure it out myself. Phenomenology.
Uh, yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's something I'm interested in, in the fields of philosophy, but I'm really not sure, and actually, I do know.
Phenomenology, it says, is the study of structures of consciousness as experienced from the first person point of view. It
Mhm,
is a
yeah,
philosophical movement that investigates, describes phenomena as a conscious experience without theories about their causal explanations and free from unexamined preconceptions and presumptions. It's like, yeah, like you're removing a lot of analytical approach to it. But then are we not analyzing phenomenology? Even like we're talking, you see what I'm saying? It's like, am I
mhm,
so deeply ingrained? Like, are animals phenomenologists? You know what I mean? Like, are other primates phenomenologists by nature? They're not really thinking about, and reflecting about objects, about people in their life or their relatives or whatever. Like, could we argue because they're conscious beings, they're sentient beings, are they
mhm.
naturally a phenomenologist? The animal kingdom. I mean, that's interesting to think about. And again, I'm gonna try to fix my camera. If I go out, I'm not really out. It just shows that
Okay.
I'm getting it out, so I can hear you just fine. I'm just trying to experiment. Let me see. Let me try right here. I'm gonna.
Yeah, so I think, like, animals I don't we as humans, at least it's our understanding that we have kind of like the highest level of consciousness and we can sit around and ask questions of like within the field of phenomenology. And
Oh,
like animals have, phenomena, they experience things, but I think, like you said, they don't sit around contemplating. Like dogs don't sit around and be like, oh, I'm a dog. This is interesting. What is it like to be a dog?
Like, no,
Um,
I think, therefore I am. There's
yeah,
no
right,
Rene
right.
Descartes,
Dogs are
right?
just dogs, yeah, doing their dog stuff, um, or cats or whatever. Um, so yeah, I don't know. It's something I would love to learn more about, especially after the lecture that I went to is awesome. Marion is like 80 years old, this French dude, and he just put out like kind of his magnum opus. It looks like this. It's called Revelation Comes from Elsewhere. Um,
Oh, okay.
it's like this was like kind of his thing that he talked about, which was interesting. I don't know, but like consciousness studies, though, I think consciousness is really interesting. Um, philosophically, uh, I know a little bit more about that, because you have basically two main perspectives today, where you have this kind of reductionistic materialist perspective, where consciousness is just chemicals in your brain,
Yeah.
and then you also have the kind of mind body dualism, where spirit or consciousness and your body are two separate things. Um, but then you kind of run into the mind body problem. How do those things communicate? Blah 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 blah.
Right.
What I'm more interested in is called panpsychism, or panexperientialism, is a way that David Ray Griffin kind of finessed the term a little bit that I prefer. But it's the idea that consciousness is actually ubiquitous in the universe. Um, Not in the sense that one way you could kind of straw man and caricature panpsychism would be to say that like the tree, if you go outside and kick the tree and say "fuck you, tree," that now the tree is sad because like you hurt its feelings.
Yeah.
The tree is not conscious in the way that you and I are, but the smalling is, if you get down to the smallest things, whatever that make up the universe, their experience isn't zero. And so as like these things with like, I mean, you have like proto panpsychism, so things are like proto conscious, blah, blah. There's a whole bunch to it. But um I'm a big fan of that perspective because it, can get rid of the mind body problem. It does a lot of fun stuff with quantum physics. It makes theology way more fun, like process relational thought that is panentheistic and assumes panpsychism. I think if God exists, that's the best model for God. It's the one that would be most worthy of worship. Um, so
Yeah, I
I
think
don't
I
know.
think I think panentheism is very interesting, and there, you're talking about a really highly advanced level of theology and philosophy. Many have attributed, like, in him we live and we move and we have our being, that passage in Acts, right? Like,
Mhm,
that's panentheism right there. So some have attributed that's how God interacts with the world. And, they often confuse it with pantheism, and it's not. There's a
mhm,
clear distinction. So it's like, I think panentheism is very intriguing. If there is a God out
mhm.
there, I think panentheism is pretty much warranted. But we're almost hitting the hour mark. Are there any other topics you'd like to discuss? Anything that maybe you like to go over? I think we've, kind of scratched the surface on a lot of things. And I think you have,
Yeah.
some pretty high insight. You know what I mean? I don't think that most Christians get this deep into, philosophy and, the meaning of life, the nature of being. Is there any other topics you'd like to discuss?
Uh, I don't know. I think my problem is I just sit in constant existential dread and then overthink everything, and then I'm a nerd and I read a bunch of books.
Yeah,
um, but like, yeah, I don't know. I think it's a worthy endeavor, and like I think conversations like this are so fun, um, because I think it's helpful. Like people coming together and trying to figure out what it means to be human. I think that's like a really great question to ask. And especially like someone like yourself who's really concerned with the problem of evil and eliminating suffering. Um, like even if I, was like, say I'm now an evangelical Christian again, I hope I wouldn't see you as somebody who's like my opponent or enemy, but rather somebody
sure,
living in the world to bring about the same ends that I want, which is human flourishing. That's
sure.
what I care about. Um, and so like I don't know, for me, having all of these conversations is fun, and I like, living up in the clouds and using big nerdy words, but ultimately, um, I'm concerned how we treat each other and how we move in the world. Ooh, that's a good question. Uh, I'll I'll have a go at it in a second, but I think like to quote my friend Dr. Leah Robinson, who she's a practical theologian. She likes to say, "I don't care if you believe if God exists or not. What are you doing with it?" And
Gotcha.
that's what I'm
Very
more
good.
interested in. And with Caputo, he would say something similar. He would say, "I'm not so interested in the name of God, but what is getting done in the name of God. What is
Ah,
getting itself done in the name of God?" And so, um, that's that. He says, "What do I think the gospel is?" The I would say that the gospel is the good news, that you are loved. I don't know, that you are accepted, that the truest thing about you is that you're known, seen, and loved by God. Um, but I think that then has
does it involve the death, burial, resurrection of Christ?
um, I mean, I think symbolically, yes. Eh, I think symbolically, yes, because and actually, I don't know. This is a very live question for me. I used to do a lot of atonement stuff, and like I haven't really thought about it too long, in a while. Are what we and what are we saved from when we believe the gospel? I don't know what we're saved from. I like for me, salvation is less about going to heaven when we die because I don't even know that that's a place, and it's more about becoming fully human now. Like to use Christian language, I don't think sin is what makes us human, right? That was a common joke in church world was like, "Oh, I fucked up. I'm just a human." I think
Yeah.
sin actually dehumanizes people within the Christian tradition if we understand it correctly. Like, is my understanding of it, Jesus represents what a human is supposed to be within the Christian tradition. And so salvation is the process of becoming human. If Jesus is the ultimate revelation of who God is in the Christian tradition, and then we're meant to imitate to be image bearers of the divine. That's what it looks like, is to look like Jesus. And salvation is that process. It's not necessarily that we're saved from something, but saved for something or to something or into something.
Gotcha.
And it's an ongoing process. I don't uh like, or theosis within the Eastern Orthodox Church. This is the idea of humans becoming one with God. That sounds very much outside of at least evangelical Christianity, but like half the
Yeah.
fucking church teaches it.
Yeah, for
uh,
sure.
so you like make a joke like make salvation theosis again or something like that. Make sanctification theosis again. Uh, but yeah, that's I don't know. Gospel language is hard for me. But like I mean, if you look at the text, you can say like setting the captives free, restoring sight to the blind, caring for the widows and orphans, these kind of things. I think it has to do with creating the kingdom of God here on earth as it is in heaven, um, is the goal. But that can never be done with coercive power. It's not about selling out to empire. Um,
Gotcha.
so Christian nationalism, big no no.
Gotcha. Well,
Yeah,
we covered a lot of topics. Yeah, it's been about a good hour, and thank you for coming on. Again, I want to apologize for my camera going out. I don't know what in the hell's happening here. Like I've tried everything. Like it just
it's
says,
the
"Hey, we're
it's the demons, Tristan. They're coming
probably
for
it's what
us.
it
They're
is.
getting all
Exactly what it
upset.
is."
They're all upset and
Yeah.
they're messing with the system.
I
They're
put
trying.
this icon on me. Yeah, I put this icon of me staring these demons right in the face. You want to shut off my camera, you're still gonna get my face looking at you right there, like I'm gonna blast you with my gun. But
They're trying to
anyways,
ruin your witness.
it's probably what it is. But Josh, I appreciate you coming on. You're very, very intelligent. You're very incisive. I'm very surprised that you still identify yourself as a Christian, quite frankly. You seem
Me
to be
too.
more of a, yeah, you seem to be more of a skeptic, a neutralist, maybe I would say even a neutralist, like,
Mhm.
but I know that most Christians would deem you as not a Christian, or at least, someone will, say, oh, a liberal Christian or something like that. But I know you understand that completely.
Yeah.
But hey, I appreciate your insight. I appreciate you coming on. And again, I'm gonna go ahead and post you have a YouTube channel, and I'll go ahead and post your your Instagram page in the description. And if anybody wants to reach out to you, that'll be great. Are there any other questions, any other topics you like to address? Maybe you want to go back and touch on something.
Um, no, man. I mean, like I said, this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for trusting me to come on a live stream and say stuff. I appreciate it.
Of course, of course, and
And
you're always well. Do you debate by any chance?
like I've never done any kind of like real formal debating. Um, I've never tried. It
Okay,
would, yeah, it would have to be the right kind of thing for me to debate because I I like seeing things from a variety of perspectives and then trying to see how they can inform my own. So debate can be difficult, but if it's on the
okay,
right thing, then I can do it. If I get passionate enough about something. Um, but yeah, that's that. But yeah, the I mean, my podcast, people can find it anywhere podcasts are found, like all the um, audio streaming platforms, these kind of things. So
cool.
I'm on Instagram, like you said, at Rethinking Faith. So I answer all my DMs and stuff. So if people want to hop over there and say what's up, feel free.
Sweet. Thank you so very much. I want to try something really quickly. I'm going to go ahead and leave
Okay.
the studio and then I'm going to come right back in. I don't think it's going to end the stream, but I'm just going to do it really quickly just to see if it'll get my camera working. I'll be right back.
All right.
Okay. Give me 1 second.
Cool. Now I'm live. I have complete control over this podcast now. We can talk about whatever I want. Uh, just kidding. I would not do that. Um, but I'm down to hang out. You see, my shirt says "Bad theology kills." I think that's true. We have too much bad theology in the world. Could probably use some better.
It didn't work, but I just wanted to know what in the world is happening here. But again, Josh, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'm looking forward to having more conversations with you in the future. And, thank you everyone for your attention. Thank you for your input. And we're going to go ahead and sign off. Thank you so much, Josh, and all the best to you.
Yeah, peace.
All righty. Peace out.